From American Falls to Malad, we've got the biggest stories in District 5 covered. This is the Southeast Idaho Prepcast with Jordan Kaye.
Welcome into another edition of the Southeast Idaho Prepcast here on IdahoSports.com, breaking down all the biggest stories that happened in District 5 over the past week. Brandon Bainey joined by Jordan Kaye from the Idaho State Journal. Jordan, what's up?
Not much. Hanging in there. How about you?
Yeah, the same. You were a busy guy last week. You had Thursday night football, Friday night football, college football Saturday.
Yeah, Idaho State had to play at 8:30 p.m., which was awesome.
What ended up being the final score of that game? I kind of was casually watching.
49-10, but it was a lot closer than that.
Yeah. Okay.
And apparently that Nevada quarterback's projected to go number 1, which I didn't know. So not a terrible loss.
Yeah, well, I don't want to say this too loudly because I know we have so many Boise State fans, that watch, but I think Nevada's going to win the Mountain West this year.
Really?
We'll see. But
Boise State's got a big one too this week. Oklahoma State on the blue.
Yeah, that'll be interesting for sure. Yeah. All right, well, that's college football. We're going to focus more on. We'll bring it back into the high school ranks here. We talked about you were busy because all of the Pocatello schools actually played on Thursday night last week. It was a doubleheader inside Holt Arena. Pocatello was up first. They beat Jackson Hole, Wyoming, 46-20. And then you had Highland running roughshod over Century in that rivalry game, 45-6. What were your big takeaways from those two games?
For Pocatello, I mean, the real thing, there was a couple. One, they brought back Julian Bowie, who's, a stud basketball player, little over 6'1", kind of a big kid. But I remember seeing him, and I said, what's up, after the, there was the first game at Madison they played, and he was just in street clothes, and then I guess he got the itch to come back and has been practicing for the last 2 weeks, ends up catching a 50-yard touchdown down the field, and you're like, well, Pokey just got another weapon all of a sudden. That was interesting, and then just to see their defensive line against, a Wyoming team that had been pretty touted. I know they were a somewhat of a 4A school in Wyoming, I believe, how their numbers stack up. And it's a good team, good competition, and they just, steamrolled them in the trenches. So that was very impressive. And then the Highland game, it's tough to judge because Bruin Fleischman wasn't playing for Century. So you just take away their best player. All of a sudden, it's just not exactly a fair matchup. And so, the Highland or the Century offense really struggled to get anything going. The Highland pass rush was too good, too dominant. They could break through the holes. They could get to McKee and Romriel just about as quickly as they wanted. And then, on the offensive side, we've now seen Highland put up over 40 points in the last 2 weeks. But, I think there's even room for Jack Whitmer, their quarterback, to improve accuracy-wise. That first quarter, I think he struggled a little bit. He even said, there's a little nerves, got to just settle down a little bit. But right before the half, he hits, Kevin Dahlstrom, who was playing because one of the receivers, Jackson Schumann, was injured, hits him on a 60-yard touchdown, then a 50-yard touchdown. All of a sudden, Highland goes into half, no problems, and then they just roll to a big win. So those were a couple of the things I noticed on the Thursday games.
I guess the biggest takeaway I have is Century is losing guys. Highland is losing guys. Pokey is adding guys.
Yeah, well, not necessarily, because in that game, their quarterback, Ryan Payne, went out with a shoulder injury. And so he went to the hospital right afterwards and got x-rays, and it wasn't broken, but they're not sure, what it's looking like or if he's going to be able to play against Highland this week. So that's kind of an up in the air thing. What's nice for Pocatello is if Payne, somehow can't play, we're able to get, Dre Contreras, their sophomore, a couple snaps, actually played the entire second half against Jackson Hole. So when you look at that experience, you're like, okay, he looked pretty poised, and I know Pocatello had a big lead, so it's, tough to say exactly how much of a pressure situation he was thrust into, but he looked good. He looked poised. He relied on his running game, and he was able to hit guys in stride when he had to pass. So that's the positive, but, if they don't have Ryan Payne, that would be a tough loss.
For sure. And I was curious if they didn't have Payne, would they move Zach Park from slot receiver back to quarterback? That's what he played last year, but it sounds like they're going to keep him where he's at.
Yeah, because that was what I was kind of I actually don't. I suppose they could move Zach Park over, but if you're going to play Drake Contreras like in the second half, I'm guessing that he's just the number 2 guy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was also wondering that when Payne went out, like who's the backup, and I guess it's the sophomore.
Yeah, Dre was on the varsity team last year, kind of at the end of the year as a freshman. But they gave him they just handed him a number. I think it was number 37, or he had a number in the 30s. So it was really weird to see him come in at quarterback at the end of a couple of games last year. I assume he has a more traditional QB number this year.
If I remember, it's 2, which is
okay.
cooler than 37 or whatever. So yeah, he's moving up.
For sure. And then, I was really surprised when I read your recap of the game and I saw Julian Bowie. I was like, I didn't think he was on the team, but
he's not even in the program. He's actually just somehow they got his picture in there, but he's on the outside. So I'm not sure if he's photoshopped in there or not, but he's not on the numerical roster. I was like, oh, this is, I just imagine the Jackson Hole coaches being like, who the heck is this kid? All of a sudden he just hops in, streaks down the sideline for a 50-yard touchdown. They just got to be looking at the program where did this guy come from? So that was what I found pretty entertaining.
Yeah, I think that's happening to a lot of teams around the state. The rosters are in flux, and so yeah, for sure. Let's talk about Pocatello on the strength of that 3-0 start. They've looked really, really good. They were the number 1 team in the media poll this week for 4A football. How about that?
Yeah. That was surprising. I had them at 2, just behind Skyline. The only reason being that, I don't think it's fair to drop Skyline for losing to the best 5A team in the state. You're not supposed to win that game. And they hung tough, and I thought that was, as good of a loss as you can possibly have in high school football. So I just didn't feel like I could drop them. But others did, and Pocatello jumped up to number 1. And I think it just adds more intrigue to this Black and Blue Bowl this week, because you look at this Highland-Pocatello rivalry, but realistically for the last decade, it hasn't been. It's been one-sided. Highland's won the last 10, and you go into 2021, Pocatello has all this hype, new logo, new quarterback, new enthusiasm. And, it seems like they have this momentum that, oh, man, there's people wow, could they pull the upset? But it's the same old Highland team that is great every year, has guys on the line who are 20 pounds, 30 pounds heavier than, the Pocatello linemen. And you're still wow, this is still, a bigger team, maybe a faster team, but, a bigger team at least. And I don't know, it's going to be interesting. But man, now it's seeing the number 1 4A team against the number 4 5A team. Wow. That's as good of a matchup as you could have expected.
Yeah, I think the one key for Pocatello is going to be, how does their offensive line handle Colvin and Lamson and that really stout Highland defensive line. And if they can hold their own, I'm not saying win the battle necessarily, but do enough to give those skill guys enough time to do what they need to do, then I think Pokey can be right in the game. But Highland does have the size advantage, especially on the lines. So that'll be key.
100%. And what's working for Pocatello is they all play like they're bigger. You look at their defensive line and their offensive line. I mean, those guys go all out every play. They play physical. They play hard. They run to the ball. They swarm ball carriers. If you're going to pull the upset, you need your effort and your, tenacity, all that to be at 110%. And I think Pocatello, regardless of who they play, they're going to give that. So if there's any chance at an upset, you feel good about that Pocatello team, knowing that you're going to get their all, and they're going to be pretty fierce.
Yeah, it's going to be a really fun Black and Blue Bowl for sure. You mentioned Highland's kind of owned it lately, really since the split, right? Since Highland stayed at 5A and Pocatello went to 4A. I will say historically that when Pocatello does beat Highland in this matchup, it usually means it's a really deep playoff run for Pocatello, and I think even a championship season in the mid 2000s. So that's going to be what's on the line there. And Pokey fans are excited. It's weird. Pocatello is kind of like in the NFL, like the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah,
I feel like when the Cowboys are good, it's good for the entire league. It's a better product to the NFL. When Pocatello High is good in football, I think it's better for the entire state in terms of 4A football.
Yeah, it's weird. Like you'll go into like restaurants or something, and people like I've gone into a bar and like this guy was just talking to me about the game, and I was like, whoa, this is really weird. Like, we're still like 6 days away or 5 days away from this high school football game, and like people around here like really care about it, and it's so cool to see that there's this ingrained passion. And you're right, with all the tradition and history of Pocatello in this city, everyone cares. And that's why I think it's going to be so interesting and so fun. And it'll probably be the most people I've ever seen in Holt by a lot.
Yes, that's for sure. We'll get a report on that next week on if the conditions, the atmosphere improved or not. Okay. So that's where you were Thursday. You were at Holt Arena for all the Pocatello schools. Then Friday, Holt Arena was being used, but it was mostly District 6 teams. So you actually went out and watched the good old rivalry game between Blackfoot and Snake River. The Broncos end up winning 35-21. What were your takeaways there?
The first half, Snake River just looked like a completely different team. And I watched them the week before against Westside. Everything they struggled with offensively. Couldn't run the ball. They didn't have enough time to pass. Their defense looked out of sorts against the wing T. And all of a sudden, Snake River comes out their first 2 drives, and I believe they scored on their first 2 drives, took an early 14-0 lead. And it just looked like, okay, this is the Snake River offense that scored 57 points against Kimberly. Zach Staley, Carson Hawker were just dominant running the ball. Cole Gilbert just looked so comfortable in the pocket. He understood that when, things broke down, he was going to run. He picked up a ton of yards, ton of first downs. And then all of a sudden, it just seemed like Blackfoot settled down a little bit. They realized, okay, here's what Snake River's wing T is trying to do. Here's how we can stop it. Offensively, hey, let's just keep running the ball with Austin Ramirez. But, hey, we think we have really good receivers. Why don't we just start throwing it up to them? Deegan Hale, Javante King. Let's give them the ball. And so you saw Blackfoot's offense start to open up a little bit. They started to hit their receivers, make some big plays, and all of a sudden, the tide started to turn, the momentum shift. Blackfoot's defense was playing pretty physical. Snake River, struggled in the red zone, and then it flipped, and Blackfoot scores 35 unanswered points and wins the game by a healthy margin.
Yeah, and of course, we have to talk about the catch that Javante King made. Describe to our listeners / viewers, if they haven't seen it yet, what happened.
Yeah. So I think it was a second down play. I think they were on the 39-yard line, and it was a tie game. So, pretty important possession. They had got moved back a little bit. And Javante King is this 6'4", lengthy athlete who's just unreal. I remember first seeing him in basketball season, and I couldn't believe that he was a sophomore last year. The way he moves, how physical he is, how long his strides are, it was just so impressive. Then his understanding of like how to use his body. You see it in basketball when he gets in the paint. He understands, how to move up, how to grab a rebound, all that stuff. So he wasn't getting a ton of action in the first half. I don't know if it's Snake River's off or defense just had him keyed down, or if they couldn't get him the ball, whatever. Anyway, on this play, he streaks down the sideline. He's got his defender beat, but the pass is a little underthrown. I mean, he could have easily, done the Willie Mays basket catch and had an easy touchdown. Pass a little underthrown. So all of a sudden, right around the goal line, he's got to twist his body 180 degrees. So now he's looking at the quarterback. His defender is still like looking at him. And so his defender's, hanging on him. He's looking back at the quarterback and all of a sudden jumps backward and like almost makes an Odell catch. His arm is completely outstretched, and then he catches it just one-handed, pops it up in the air as he's falling, and then grabs it and puts it into his stomach. I mean, it was just, there were so many moving parts, and I couldn't believe he actually reeled it in. I just saw the flags come down. It really couldn't even tell that he caught it until the ref signaled something.
Yeah, it was wild. And if you go to Jordan's Twitter account at Jordan K _23, you've got some video of the catch, but then also the Idaho State Journal, Kyle Riley got a really nice action shot.
Yeah,
of that catch,
and we had shout out to the Snake River coach for letting me film off his iPad because he had it. I was like, wow, can I see that, man? And he's like, yeah, sure. It was incredible. It was Yeah, Sports Center top 10.
Yeah, for sure. Play of the year, maybe, for the Blackfoot Broncos.
Yeah.
So they're 1-2. They finally get their first win. Snake River, when you look at this district for 3A football, you've got Snake River at 1-2.
Mm-hmm.
You have Marsh Valley at 1-2, and you have American Falls at 0-3. I still think that Snake River and Marsh Valley, it's too even to call. I think both of those teams are really good. They've played really challenging schedules, and that's why they're both 1-2. They've each played West Side.
Yeah.
So
I think it's going to just come down to that game. You're right. You looked at last year, and I know all those teams in that conference, I believe, were like 3-6 or something. They all finished the season 3-6 somehow. And you look at it, you're like, oh man, this conference just isn't very good. What happened is they just played a lot of tough teams, and all of them lost close games, and they were in a lot of them. And that's when you look at a 3-team conference, and you can look at all these non-conference games. Realistically, none of them really matter. You can talk about the max prep stuff and all that, but you win the American Falls game, and then you beat the Marsh Valley / Snake River, you're in the playoffs. I mean, that's all that matters. It's just going to come down to that game. So as much as we want to, overanalyze all these past games, it's just going to come down to that. But yeah, right now, from everything I've seen, it seems like the Snake River and Marsh Valley are pretty even.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even use the common opponent of West Side to really gauge because neither one of them scored against the Pirates. The Pirates haven't given up any scores since that Firth game back in week 1.
Yeah, which just shows you how good Firth is. I know they beat Bear Lake at Holt Arena. They're really good. Yeah, it's neither of them look very good against West Side, and they've looked really good in every other game. So it's so hard to tell.
Yeah. So Marsh Valley gets shut out by West Side 28-0. American Falls dropped a close game to Filer 28-14. They're still trying to find out what kind of team they have. They've got a young squad, a lot of freshmen and sophomores on that American Falls team. So, all right, 2A, let's talk about West Side. They win 28-0, continuing to roll. And I'm kind of looking now more to the rest of the I know West Side's good. The question is, who's second banana in that league? Is it Aberdeen? I don't know. They played pretty well against South Fremont, but fell 34-16. Is it Bear Lake? Well, they just got trounced by Firth 45-8. Malad, a new coach. How are they going to do? Well, they struggled, and Malad ended up falling last week to North Fremont 54-8. So to me, it's still kind of wide open beyond West Side at the top.
100%. Yeah, you have the West Side, and I think everyone thought they were the lock in this season. Then they have a close game at Firth, and all of a sudden, everyone questions that for a second. Like, okay, the door opened a little bit. Can someone sneak through? And for a little bit, I think we all thought it was Aberdeen. They just play one of the better games I've seen all season against American Falls in week 1. I think they were right around the rankings, if not just on the outside. And since then, they've lost 2 really close games against good teams. And you start to look at Aberdeen, and it's like, okay, were they just good against an American Falls team that struggled this season? Were they just playing good opponents, or were we thinking too highly of them, or maybe they were just had 2 down weeks? And so that's going to be a tough one. Same thing for Bear Lake is they still have a dynamic offense. They've got a quarterback who's shown that he can chuck the ball as good as anyone in the conference, but yeah, they lose to a Firth team who hasn't been stopped much this season. So yeah, it's tough to tell. And then you've got other teams hanging around. I don't think Soda Springs played this last week, but they snuck into the playoffs last year and upset Aberdeen. So it's so wide open. It's so hard to tell.
Yeah, it'll be fun once they actually get into conference play here, starting in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and it'll be weird or fun to see if they all beat up on each other, or if one of them emerges as the clear number 2 team.
Right, for sure. And then at the 1A level, we only had a couple of games in 5A or in the District 5 ranks. I think probably the biggest one was Grace going to Raft River. Grace is a team that's trying to contend in District 5 this year, but they lose 44-12. But Raft River wins, a lot of games. They're really good. Yeah. And then the other game that was really interesting to me was Rockland. They were 2-0 hosting Butte County. Now, Rockland is a 1A D2 school. Butte County is a 1A D1, and they fell 56-12. But I'm not sure that really tells us anything about Rockland, because I think Butte County is actually really, really good.
No, I think Butte County's been in my rankings every week, and Rockland's got one of the better offenses in that classification. They've got Gavin Perman at quarterback, who's fantastic. Teague Matthews is a 6 foot plus receiver who can go up and get anything. Then they've got a pretty good defense. The thing is, you start to look at 1A D2, and all these teams from around here have just really struggled against the upper echelon of 1A D2. I think it was North Gem lost to Cary by a couple scores, and then Butte County, which has been ranked third in that classification. Rockland struggles incredibly against them. So it's tough to tell, like, how are they, are these Rockland and North Gem teams, can they compete in the playoffs, or, are those upper echelon, the Cary, the Prairie or whatever, are they that much better? And that's what we're going to have to find out these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, so it's really interesting in that 1A D2 Rocky Mountain Conference. It certainly looks like North Gem and Rockland are going to be the two teams that are duking it out. They're so totally opposite stylistically, right? Rockland likes to spread the ball out and throw it around, and North Gem, if they attempt 5 passes in a game, something's probably gone terribly wron, because they just line up and run the ball and say, stop us if you can. In that Cary game, they rushed for over 500 yards as a team, and Woodrow Hatch is such a good rusher. So,
Brett Yost had almost 200 yards too. They killed it.
So I think we know North Gem and Rockland are going to be good, and we know they're going to be playoff teams. But you're right. The question is, are they a first, second weekend type team, or are they a Final Four type team? And so I still think North Gem is a little bit ahead of Rockland in terms of Final Four potential. But I think both teams are capable of it, but they're going to have to adjust a few things, especially defensively, if they want to advance. So
I guess the thing for Rockland's credit is Butte County is a 1A D1 team,
right?
More kids, more obviously, probably more talent. So that's not as bad of a loss. And then Cary has just been a juggernaut in 1A D2. So even that North Gem loss isn't too bad. So I think they're both going to be in contention. But like you're saying, are these going to be just teams that kind of fizzle out in the first weekend, or can they win a couple games in the playoffs? And that I don't know if we've seen yet.
Yeah, for sure. Let's preview what's coming up this week. We kind of talked about Highland and Pocatello already in the Black and Blue Bowl in Holt Arena. On IdahoSports.com, Friday afternoon/evening, I guess you want to call it, we're actually going to be bringing you the broadcast of Grace as they travel to Water Springs, which is in Idaho Falls. And so that'll be a fun matchup. 1A D1 Grace against 1A D2 Water Springs. Grace at 0-3. This could be a great opportunity for the Grizzlies to get their first win of the season.
Yeah, and they lost a lot last year. Gage Stoddard, Trey Draper's gone. Their coach, Brandon Sanchez, retired. They've got a new guy, James Newby, at the helm. And, I think they had a chance to win that North Gem game in week 1, and Bridger has threw a touchdown at the last second. And, that's a tough one to recover from, but Water Springs is a good team. I think Grace, though, can get that win.
Yeah, I think they're better than their record indicates. And so people look at Grace and go, 0-3, no big deal. They're not a bad team. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So we'll have video coverage of that game at 4:00 on Friday from Water Springs on IdahoSports.com. The other game in District 5 we're going to be broadcasting Friday night is, I think it might be the best game in the state. Coal Valley Christian traveling to Dayton to take on Westside. These are a pair of 3-0 teams. Westside number 1 in the polls, Coal Valley Christian number 5. And this could be a potential playoff preview as well.
Yeah, the interesting thing tracking Coal Valley is they didn't start the season in the rankings. And, when teams don't start the season in the rankings, I think a lot of people are, hesitant to move them up. Like, okay, let's wait a little bit. Is this team for real? And Coal Valley, the last 3 weeks have just shown that they are so much better than people thought. They're putting up big numbers. They're scoring a lot of points, and they're not allowing a ton. And, you look at that Firth Westside game. I don't know if it's going to be that close, but, man, I think Westside's going to have their hands full.
Yeah, I think so too. Coal Valley has a really good quarterback, Carter Fortin, and some good receivers to throw to. Their defense is really solid as well. Coal Valley last week, Jordan, their originally scheduled game got canceled. They were supposed to play, and their opponent backed out. And so at the last minute, they picked up a game with Fruitland, which is a 3A school, and won that game with basically no time to prep. This was like a Thursday. Hey, let's play Fruitland. We're going to play them tomorrow. And for them to come out and win was really impressive.
I knew they beat Fruitland. I did not know it was on like no time to notice. That makes it even more impressive.
Yeah, it was Fruitland's opponent canceled on them as well. So they both got together and said, hey, let's just meet up and play and see what happens. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So that's going to be 7:00 Friday night on IdahoSports.com, Coal Valley Christian at Westside. I will be there with Sean Kane to broadcast that game on IdahoSports.com. It's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, the other big matchup, I think, well, let's just keep it in 2A because we talked about how we want conference play to start. It finally does. Aberdeen is going to travel to Soda Springs, so that will be a good conference opener for each of those teams.
Yeah, Aberdeen, obviously, they've got Brody Beck at quarterback, Cale Adamson at tailback, and then Soda Springs has one of the better athletes in 2A, and Tug Cap, also the best name by far. He's their quarterback. He puts up a ton of rushing yards, ton of passing yards, and is just a dynamic athlete. So it'll be interesting to see how Aberdeen's defense can stop him.
Yeah, that'll be a great way to open the conference slate there. Otherwise, Malad is hosting West Jefferson in a non-conference game, and Bear Lake is hosting Rivalry. Bear Lake should go to 2-2 after that. Rivalry is a team that's struggling a little bit as of right now. Okay, 3A ranks. Here's the big game, Jordan. Marsh Valley is going to host Sugar Salem. Each of these teams are 1-2. This is a good opportunity for Marsh Valley to make a statement on a statewide level.
Yeah, the funny part about both teams being 1-2 is Marsh Valley's 1-2 looks a heck of a lot better than Sugar Salem's 1-2. Marsh Valley loses at the last second to the Utah 2A state champion, and their other losses, or the Utah 3A, their other losses to the Idaho reigning 2A state champion. Sugar Salem is the reigning 3A champs, and they have just not met expectations this season. Everyone thought this is by far the best team in 3A. They're going to roll to another title, all this. And man, those first 2 weeks, I think they were 0-2 and just did not look anything like the state title team. I know they lost a lot, but you think with some of these high school programs, it's more about reloading than rebuilding, especially ones that have such a history like Sugar Salem. And I think Marsh Valley, you look at this game preseason, you didn't think they had a shot. And now it's like they're almost the favorites.
Yeah, it's weird because now I feel like the pressure is almost on Marsh Valley.
Yeah.
Like Sugar comes in with no pressure.
Nothing.
Yeah, it's so funny how quickly that can swing and turn on a dime like that. The other 3A games that we have, American Falls is hosting Parma. That's a pair of 0-3 teams. Parma is a program that really struggles here. So this, okay. I mean, American Falls could get a nice win here because Parma's just really in a tough spot as a program. So,
yeah, because there's no Snake River game, is there?
Nope. And then Snake River has the night off. So, and then in the 4A ranks, we talked about Pokey playing Highland in the Black and Blue Bowl. Preston, we didn't really talk about their game. Preston was playing Bonneville, and they got out to a 28-0 lead, and Bonneville almost came back and tied it. Yeah. Preston held on to win 28-21, and this Indians team, Jordan, I guess they just don't know any other way. It's got to be a close, heart-stopping game.
They just try and make everything so close, which is why it's so hard to get a gauge on them. They're not like some of these other teams in the rankings that are just blowing out people. And I think it's probably why they've only got one vote. Is just like they make every game so close. Props to them though for pulling it out. Their quarterback Emery Thorson has been fantastic all season long. He's been playing tailback. Brecker Knapp's been at quarterback most of the time. They're both racking up a ton of yards, and so that offense is fantastic. But late in games, I mean, they pull it out, but man, they just make it, not a little too close.
Yeah, a 3-1 start for Preston. They finally have a week off because they played in week 0. So a 1-point win over Lakeland. Yeah. A 15-6. What's that? 11? An 11-point loss to Shelley. A 1-point win over Star Valley, and then a 7-point win over Bonneville. Almost every game has been one possession or less. So
yeah, and that Shelley team that they lost to moved into the rankings. So that loss looks better every week.
Yeah, I was at the Shelley game last week, broadcasting. They played Jerome and ran away 49-7. Shelley's good. They're a good team. So there's nothing wrong with that loss for Preston. So they finally have the week off. Century, a tough matchup. They're playing Idaho Falls, and this isn't the same Idaho Falls team from last year that went winless and generally was overmatched. This is a team that's 3-0, including 1-0 in their conference. It's going to be another tough battle for Century.
Yeah, I don't know if Bruin Fleischman's going to be back, but if he's not, you're going to look at a lot of the younger guys to step up. Like, McKean Romero is obviously the senior, but Jake Rawlings at receiver, a couple of their other playmakers, they've got to, kind of step up. And the offensive line has got to give him time, McKean time to throw the ball.
Yeah, for sure. So that's the football slate on tap for this week.
You missed Blackfoot at Skyline.
Oh, right. So I don't ever think of it Black, because here's the funny part.
6,
Yeah, so Blackfoot's District 6, but they are part of what you cover with the Idaho State Journal.
That is the District 6 one. Yes.
Right. But
that will be fun.
Let's talk about it real quick, because this is a big game. These are the two teams that were the preseason favorites in the coaches poll, 1 and 2. It's like kind of a bummer that they're playing so early on in the season.
Yeah, you were hoping that this could be a late one when it actually matters. But Skyline coming off not a bad loss, but a loss nonetheless. Blackfoot coming off a really, enthusiastic win. Both teams are kind of trending in opposite directions. Can Blackfoot, pull the upset? Can their playmakers do enough to stop that vaunted Skyline offense? And that's just going to be so fun to see. It'll be a great litmus test for that Broncos team. How good are they? Were those first 2 close losses, really just kind of a fluke? And this will prove it.
Yeah, for sure. And again, that's a matchup of two teams that are 1 and 2. There's so many teams, Jordan, that are 1 and 2 right now that I thought that you thought would be better coming into the season. But like we talked about with the Max Preps ratings, gone are the days where you're just going to go 9-0 and schedule a bunch of cupcakes. I think teams are learning that, hey, we need to challenge ourselves with the schedule. And if we're sitting at 1 and 2 after 3 games, that's okay. We're fine with that.
Yeah, schedule it early though. Schedule those tough games early, try and learn from them. And I think a lot of ADs are starting to, or coaches are telling their ADs, hey, we need to really broaden our range. If we've got to go to Wyoming or go to Utah to get some crazy team, like, let's do it.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's the football slate for this weekend. I was going to ask you, as you're getting like soccer and volleyball results nightly for the Idaho State Journal, is there anybody that's really standing out to you in District 5?
The Highland girls soccer team is undefeated right now. I know Sadri Bell is a senior who is just fantastic forward. She scores an incredible amount of goals. Every night it seems like she's posted 1 or 2. She was close to one of the better players in the area last year. Has only stepped up her game this season. Trying to think who else. I believe the Snake River. Let me look at this.
I know the Pocatello boys soccer team is doing really well this year also.
Pocatello boys soccer, yeah. There's I'm trying to remember. George Ashby, he's been there for a ton of years, and he said that, last season you started to see the effects of the boundaries go in, and they started to actually get players who, had soccer experience. It wasn't they were just throwing them out on the pitch and being like, all right, guys, figure it out. It was like these guys, they were finding soccer players who played, 12 months a year, and just made such a difference. I'm trying to think the other ones. Marsh Valley girls soccer, 6-0-2. Volleyball, American Falls, Pocatello, Blackfoot, Highland, they've all looked pretty good this year. So still early in the season, still a lot to figure out. There's a lot of these coaches are scheduling tough games, so it's kind of tough to tell. And with volleyball too, they're playing these, tournaments and try matches where they're going to different schools on the same night, and it's tough to gauge exactly. They're trying to get as many matches as they can early on, and once district play rolls around, you'll start to know so much more.
Yeah, I will say one volleyball team I've kind of kept an eye on is Grace Lutheran. They're a 1A school in Pocatello, private religious school, and they're doing pretty well in volleyball. They're holding their own. They went to a tough tournament in Utah a couple weeks ago, and keep an eye on the Grace Lutheran Royals, I would say.
Shout out Coach Ryan Strello, just killing it over there. I know he took over the program, and they had like very limited wins. And I think last season he, led them to more wins combined than they had in their, previous history. So yeah, shout out him. I know he's doing a great job over there.
Yeah, fairly new school. And so, yeah, they had a lot of freshmen and sophomores that are now juniors and seniors. So for sure. Okay. Also, I wanted to give a shout out real quick. We talked about 2 weeks ago how Highland High School had a National Player of the Week, right?
Yes.
On the volleyball court.
Drew Simmons.
Yeah, that's right. So for the second time in 3 weeks, Highland High School has a nationally recognized player of the week. Ian Hershey, the kicker for Highland, is named the Coles National Player of the Week for special teams.
Yeah, that was 2 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah, 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah, he hit like a 45, 43, 43, 29-yarder, hit all his extra points, 9 of 10 touchbacks. I mean, it's just such a weapon. You look at these other teams I've started to cover, they don't feel comfortable about their field goal kicker when he's out there for an extra point. And Highland gets inside the 30 and they're like, all right, we got 3 points. We'll be all right. And it's going to be fun to see if that comes into play against Pocatello. I know Pocatello struggled a little bit in the kicking game the last couple of weeks. And you would think that if the game gets close, Highland trusts Ian Hershey enough, especially in the Dome, where I don't know if he's missed this season. Maybe one. I think he missed once in the Rocky Mountain game, but that was a long field goal. And so, yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah. And so he's got an offer from Idaho State University. He went and visited Nevada last week.
Yeah, I saw that.
So, man, ISU, we talk about ISU. You got to get your in-state kids. This is a kid you got to get. You can't. I understand the allure of playing big time Mountain West football, and you can't really compete with that. But if they lose out on Ian Hershey to another FCS type school, that's a bad look for ISU. I think
that would be rough. But look at Ian's Twitter. I mean, he's going to like Oregon State and Cal. You get one Pac-12 offer. A lot of the times, more follow, especially for kickers. All it takes is one big school to offer, and others try and copy it. So, if ISU loses out to him because he's going to a Pac-12 school or Mountain West, yeah, I don't think you can blame him there. I would actually encourage him to probably go somewhere else, get as much notoriety, as much scholarship money as you can.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So yeah, ISU in the running right now, but lots of schools.
Hard for them to offer him early. I will say that.
Yes, for sure. All right.
You got to offer quick.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. So, all right. Well, that'll do it for this week's edition of the Southeast Idaho Prepcast. You can get this podcast audio only at our site, IdahoSports.com. Also, wherever you download your podcasts from. You can also catch the video of this each week on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, as well as the Facebook page. If you want to see the Arizona State Sun Devils flag in the background of Jordan's setup, repping those ASU Devils.
Gotta go into Provo this week.
That is going to be, man. There's a lot of BYU fans around here, and they were pretty fired up after last week's win over Utah. So,
if anyone's got the BYU ticket hookup, let me know.
There you go. I'm sure somebody could help you out for sure. So, all right. Well, we'll be back to talk more District 5 athletics next week on a new edition of the Southeast Idaho Prepcast right here on IdahoSports.com.